All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, I've stated this numerous times on this channel. Whatever your field of endeavor is, especially if it's a field involving creativity or expression, either physically, mentally, or what have you, you know when you're encountering somebody who's a kindred spirit, who's a so-called peer of yours, someone who you have to take seriously because you understand that down the line, this person is going to challenge you for whatever authority you might have in that field of endeavor. If it's the sports world, if you're the champion as a boxer or a golf professional or what have you, you know that when you see someone who has great talent, whether or not they're going to be a problem down the line. And it's the same thing in team sports as well. Great basketball teams, great football teams, they know when they get on the court or on the field with another team, whether or not that team will pose a threat down the line. Why am I saying all this? Because the Golden State Warriors squared off against the Toronto Raptors for the second time in about 2 weeks. And in that first game in Toronto, it was a very close game, but the Warriors had to rally down the stretch in the fourth quarter, led by Kevin Durant, to force overtime. They eventually lost that game. Well, those same two teams had a rematch last week in Oracle Arena, except this time the Toronto Raptors did not have their best player, Kawhi Leonard. The result was the same, except the disparity in points was even greater because the Toronto Raptors totally blew the Warriors off of their home floor. In the aftermath of that game, Kevin Durant basically seemed to attest to the fact that he understands that the Raptors are a serious threat and that if they meet them in the finals, they're going to have to go all out to beat them. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Raptors taking down the Warriors at Oracle with no Kawhi Leonard, who sat out with hip soreness. Keep this in mind. Toronto is 7-1 without Kawhi. Kyle Lowry showed out, 23 points, 12 assists. Meanwhile, Steph Curry.
You guys notice the super liberal sports media, they keep trying to accentuate how successful the Raptors have been without Kawhi Leonard. Why are they doing that? Because they're trying to subconsciously program into the brain of Kawhi that Toronto does not need you. You should leave Toronto and hopefully sign with our boo thing, LeBron James, with the Lakers. I don't think that that's going to happen, but that's what they're trying to do. They keep harping on this. Toronto 7-1 without Kawhi Leonard. Well, what are you really trying to say by accentuating that? Are you saying that Toronto is a better team without Kawhi Leonard? Because if that's not what you're saying, why do you keep bringing that up for?
Curry, not himself, 3 of 12 shooting, but KD put in work, 37-5. Durant is aware the Raptors have arrived. Take a listen.
And once again, no disrespect to Kevin Durant, but this is a notion that we've seen over and over and over again when he has big scoring nights for the Golden State Warriors. For the most part, his points don't mean much if he's the leading scorer. In order for Golden State to be successful, the overall paradigm is that Steph Curry has to lead their team in scoring. When he does, that's normally when they win. As a matter of fact, there's a pretty unassailable link between Steph Curry going ham against many of the Golden State Warriors opponents. If he goes ham, especially in the third quarter, scores 20 to 25 points, it normally ends in a Warriors blowout over their opponent. Now, when Kevin Durant goes ham, when he has 40 points, it's normally at the very best a close game. If not, the Warriors lose. So that shows you that oftentimes Kevin is not scoring his points within the flow of the offense. He's getting his points in one-on-one matchups. And that's something that Steve Kerr does not particularly like, but he knows that Kevin Durant is a weapon that they're going to need in order to almost guarantee the chip. So they need KD. But at the end of the day, his points are nowhere near of the same value as a Steph Curry.
The leaders of that team have been through some wars, so I wouldn't call them a young team, or I won't say them beating us 2 times is going to give them extra confidence. They've been balling before that, and they're going to be balling after they beat us. So, I mean, they're not an up-and-coming team.
Now, did you hear what Kevin stated? He said they're going to be balling after they beat us. Now, of course, what he means consciously is that they're still going to be playing very good basketball once they leave the Oracle Arena, you know, when they go on to fulfill the rest of their schedule in the NBA's regular season. But it seems that they've gotten into his head that this is a team that is going to pose a major threat in the finals should they get there. And the way that they've beaten Golden State in these 2 games, it seems to me that Kevin Durant believes that they're the better team.
And they're here.
Stephen A., what'd you learn?
What I learned is that the Toronto Raptors should be under immense pressure, because when you go 7-1 without Kawhi, when you go up against the Golden State Warriors, the 2-time reigning defending NBA champions, and you perform the way that you perform, neutralizing them, beating them by 20 points, essentially blowing them out.
Their defense is exceptional, and I've been stating this for the duration of the season. What the Toronto Raptors bring to the table on defense is something that you really can't find across the NBA because of their great athleticism and length. When you have Kawhi Leonard, Serge Ibaka, this kid Siakam, this other kid, Anunoby, you also have Kyle Lowry, who's a relatively good defender. They probably have the best overall defense in the NBA. I'm not sure where they're ranked, but no matter where they're ranked by the end of the year, they have that type of defense where they could ratchet it up, especially in the playoffs. The only question, in my view, is going to be Kyle Lowry and whether or not he's going to have a mental breakdown because he still cannot get over the fact that they traded away his boo thing, DeMar DeRozan.
The excuses have evaporated. LeBron James is no longer in the Eastern Conference. Kawhi Leonard is in the Eastern Conference. The rest of the nucleus of your team has remained intact. As Kevin Durant pointed out, you got two champions on the squad in Danny Green and Kawhi. You've got experienced guys like Ibaka, like Valanciunas, who got hurt last night. We hope he's okay. Like a Kyle Lowry. You have perimeter shooting. You have athleticism. You have lengthy defenders. You have all the things that Max has religiously pointed out.
They pretty much have everything, Stephen A. Smith. We get it. What I learned from the two games that the Warriors played against the Raptors is that DeMarcus Cousins, even though we perceived him to be frosting on top of a very rich cake at the start of the season, he's going to end up being a necessity. The Warriors are going to need DeMarcus Cousins in order to win a championship this year. This is not going to be a case where they go to the playoffs and just turn it on. He's going to have to be a heavy contributor in order for them to win a championship this year because their bench is not good at all.
Even before this season began. And so if you can do what you can do and what you have done without the services of Kawhi Leonard and still blow out the Golden State Warriors on their home court, what excuse is there for you not to be in the finals this season? The pressure is mounting, and we'll see how they respond to it.
I agree the pressure is on the Toronto Raptors to make the finals. They're going to have to make the finals, if for no other reason, but to convince Kawhi Leonard that that's the place for him to re-sign with. Because I don't care what anybody says. Right now, it's all the way up in the air for Kawhi in regards to what team he's going to sign with. Because I believe that he does want to come back to LA, most likely with the Clippers, and the Toronto Raptors are going to have to change his mind. They're going to have to get to the finals and probably win in order for him to stay.
I don't think there's additional pressure for the Raptors. Look, when you bring up no excuses, it's as though they're looking for them. The fact of the matter is LeBron was their kryptonite because their best player was not MVP caliber, and as you well know, Stephen A. having covered.
Right, but the goal was not to get to the finals. The goal is to win. So taking LeBron James out of the Eastern Conference, what that does is that opens up the probability for them to get to the finals, but they have to win the finals. That's where the pressure comes in. And that's why I agree with Stephen A. Smith to a degree. To a degree, I agree with him. They have to get to the finals and win. At the very least, they have to take the Warriors to 7 games for Kawhi to consider coming back, in my view. But removing LeBron James from the Eastern Conference, all that does is that gives the Toronto Raptors hope to get there.
Been covered the sport for so long. The team that wins the championship almost always has at least one MVP caliber player on the team.
Agreed.
Oftentimes 2 MVP caliber players. The Raptors last year had 0, and they ran into LeBron James, and that was all she wrote.
Well, not only did they have 0 MVP quality players, their 2 best players are also mentally fragile. And that's the real issue with them. And to me, once again, that's the real issue with them this year. And that's the only issue with them, is that one of their better players, Kyle Lowry, is mentally fragile. He's psychologically unstable. He has not admitted that as forthrightly as DeMar DeRozan has last year, but it's very obvious that he is. And he had a codependent relationship with DeMar DeRozan that he still has not been able to move past.
But now, this team that just won, is so far 7-1 this year without Kawhi, it's no longer DeMar DeRozan, nice all-star player, as their best player. It's Kawhi Leonard. Every year he is healthy. He is MVP caliber. He is Defensive Player of the Year in the running. He is a Finals MVP. You want to talk about how he'd respond to LeBron. He has already won a Finals MVP because of the defense he played on LeBron. You want to know how he'd respond to the Warriors? When last seen healthy in a playoff series against the Warriors, he took a totally undermanned Spurs team, a not talented and old Spurs team, to a 23-point lead at the half. At that moment, he got hurt, and
Well, we can't call the Spurs not talented, because you can't have no talent and get to the Western Conference Finals. And Kawhi Leonard was on that team. We can't say that he was on the team and he's very talented on an MVP caliber or on an MVP level, but the team had no talent. They had him, so they had some talent. They also had LaMarcus Aldridge. They also had, I believe, Pau Gasol. Even though he was an older player, he's still very skilled. They had an older Manu Ginobili, who's still very skilled. Tony Parker, very skilled. These are older players, but they're very skilled. So we can't say they had no talent.
Spurs never whiffed the win in that series again. So is there pressure on Toronto? Sure, there's pressure on Toronto. Is there more on them now than other teams? No, I think Kawhi's presence on that team puts more on other teams than the Raptors. Kawhi there means the Celtics are looking at them right now, not like, yeah, they'll get us in the regular season, but we have too much upside in the playoffs. It means even the Warriors are looking at them and thinking, we think we have the best team, but damn, if Kawhi is healthy and sees us in the finals, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, it's going to be a major problem for the Warriors. It's going to be a major fight. Should the Warriors face the Raptors in the finals, I see it going at least 6 games. And to be quite frank with you, it could be the Raptors in 6.
Well, I definitely think they have that kind of vision. I don't disagree with you there. But what I would say to you is that, listen, ultimately when expectations rise, even if it's from the outside, you never know what palms might get sweaty, what backsides might get tight.
I agree. And that's what the Warriors have going for them, which is their championship experience, their championship pedigree. As of right now, if you were to ask me who I would pick in the finals between the Warriors and the Raptors, I would pick the Warriors. I say Warriors in 7, maybe 6. It depends on who has home court. 6 or 7 as of right now. A fully healthy Warriors team with DeMarcus Cousins. But it would not shock me at all if the Raptors were able to defeat them.
This is what pressure is all about. It's not necessarily how you interpret it or how I interpret it. It's the fact that it exists. How different players may respond to it. Because again, you got to remember, this is the Toronto Raptors organization that's been knocking on the door for a few years, that's been giving indications that they're coming, but ultimately never arrived, obviously in large part because of LeBron James. And even before that, this is an organization that once had Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady on the same team, even though it was a young Tracy McGrady. This is a Raptors organization that once went against the Philadelphia 76ers in 2001 when I was covering them, and it was one of the greatest experiences, Max, of my career.
Yeah, that was a very good series. That was probably the best series of 2001. The Philadelphia 76ers, that playoff run, they had some very exciting matchups in the playoffs. They had a 7-game series against the Toronto Raptors. They had another 7-game series against the Milwaukee Bucks. And to be quite frank with you, I thought that both those teams were better than Philadelphia. But because Allen Iverson was able to raise his level of intensity in every game where they needed him, and it also seemed like they had the officials' whistles in crucial moments, the Sixers were able to get to the finals. But I always say the main reason why the Raptors lost that Game 7 in Philadelphia is because Vince Mama's Boy Carter decided that he was going to attend his quote-unquote graduation ceremony as opposed to being locked into the game. You've already gone through the curriculum. You've done what you needed to do to pass the course. Go let your mother accept the quote-unquote diploma for you while you focus on what you need to do for your team in a crucial moment. This guy decided that he was going to take a plane, get to the arena about an hour and a half before the game, and to be quite frank with you, he played subpar. But as I've already stated, I always felt like Vince Carter was a player who did not really want that mantle of being the quote-unquote best player in the NBA. That was too much pressure for him. Kobe wanted it. Vince did not want it because in all actuality, Vince Carter was more talented overall, physically gifted than Kobe Bryant. He had hands like Michael Jordan and Julius Erving. He was a higher vertical leaper. He was more explosive in the lane even than Kobe. Not by much, but he was. But Kobe Bryant's mentality far exceeded Vince Carter's. And that's why Kobe Bryant became what he became and why Vince Carter is probably going to end his career with 30,000 points while playing 30 seasons in the NBA.
watching Allen Iverson and Vince Carter go back and forth with one another. I'm talking about 50-point explosions by Iverson. All of a sudden, Vince Carter would show up and do the same thing. That series went 7 games. I remember standing in the tunnel of what was called the Wachovia Center back then, that is now the Wells Fargo Center, where Billy King, the GM for the Philadelphia 76ers, was standing in the hallway, and after a Sixers loss, he literally was sitting there and talking to us, talking about, do you not realize what you're seeing here? This is some special stuff. You don't get this every single day, because you saw the greatness that existed in Vince Carter at that particular moment in time, and you saw the hopes of the Toronto Raptors organization, but it never materialized. So now you're in a situation, after all of these years, after being the lone team in Canada, because the Vancouver Grizzlies are not a Memphis Grizzlies and what have you. It's a situation where you're looking at the Raptors and you're saying to yourself, now is the time. We've been knocking on the door periodically over the last couple of decades. Now it's time for us to stand up and step up and answer the call, and you have the crew to do it. So we'll see if they do.
Well, they better do it, because there's a lot riding on this, on their potential playoff run. I think that the future of their team is riding on this, because if they don't make the finals this year, Kawhi Leonard is not going to re-sign, and I believe that Masai Ujiri is going to clean house and probably remove every player on the team except for Siakam and Anunoby. I guarantee you that Kyle Lowry's out of there. If they can trade him away, they will, because he's already trying to pose himself as a malcontent.
You bring up Vince Carter, who people forget because he's had such a long, excellent career and reinvented himself. They forget how...
Well, he's had a long career. I wouldn't call it long and excellent.
Forget how spectacular he was at his best. It was unclear to everyone who was better between him and Kobe when they were young. Like, who was going to win? Kobe obviously won that.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting it in proper context, and I'll take it a step further, because a lot of people forget this. After Carter won the slam dunk contest in 2000, there were people talking about how he was greater than Jordan, how he had the potential to be greater than Michael Jordan, and how he was doing things that quote-unquote Jordan never did or Jordan couldn't do. That's how far they were taking the comparisons back then.
But at the time, it was like, not so fast on Vince. And then Tracy McGrady became an elite player. But I'm here to tell you, Kawhi at his...
Well, Tracy was an elite scorer. I would not call him an elite all-around player. He was above average on defense. He tried, but he was never a great defender.
At his best, as an overall player, is better than both those guys.
I agree with that. I would take a prime Kawhi Leonard fully healthy over Vince or Tracy McGrady at their best, because he plays winning basketball. Kawhi Leonard is going to win wherever he goes.
Kawhi is the best player that franchise has ever had.
I'd agree with that. Kawhi's better than Vince. He's better than Tracy McGrady. He's better than Chris Bosh. He's better than DeMar DeRozan.
Right now, and they're 7-1 without him, Stephen A. If there's an Achilles heel on this team, you saw that Kyle Lowry and Masai Ujiri, everything's not kosher there right now.
Agreed.
We've also seen, as well as Kyle Lowry is playing, as you always say, he's relatively, miniature, right? And the way that it's not...
Not only is he, quote-unquote, relatively miniature, Kyle Lowry is just not transcendent in any one thing. He's a good passer. He's a relatively good shooter. He'll have games where he can hold his own amongst the NBA's elite point guards. But he just folds up a lot in the playoffs. He's kind of like a small point guard version of James Harden. He'll have a very good regular season. Of course, he's nowhere near on the level of James Harden, but he's comparable because he does similar things in the regular season as opposed to the postseason. Because the way that the NBA referees officiate the games in the postseason is so different from the regular season, that oftentimes is where it's allowed to manifest who the truly great players are, as opposed to who's shining in the regular season when they're going against teams that are tired from playing back-to-backs, and you're playing against the fourth guy off the bench as opposed to a 7-man rotation like you will in the playoffs.
Not just his size on defense, which is a problem in the playoffs. It's also he hasn't been exactly Drew Holiday when they've needed him the most. He's sort of
can't be Drew Holiday.
Of course.
He can't be Drew Holiday, who's a legit 6'5".
He doesn't play the same in the regular season as he does in the playoffs.
Is Drew Holiday really a legit 6'5" Stephen A. Smith? I'm not sure about that. I say Drew Holiday's probably about 6'3.5", maybe 6'4".
He
never has. He never has because of his size.
this year to get it done.
When you bring up an Achilles heel on this team, it comes down to if Kyle Lowry can be regular season Kyle Lowry in the playoffs, this team can go all the way. If he can't, they won't.
Agreed and agreed.
Period.
They got a shot.
Otherwise, this team, that's right, they have a real shot.
Well, what I love about it, what I love about it, Max and Molly, is that I'm looking at it and I'm actually fantasizing about the positive. I don't lose if Boston or Toronto ends up in the finals, because I think it's going to be interesting no matter what. Whoever goes against the Golden State Warriors, I think we're going to have ourselves a legitimate bona fide NBA Finals series.
There's no doubt about that, because the Warriors are not as good as they've been the last couple of years. And the Boston Celtics or the Toronto Raptors are going to be far better than the Cleveland Cavaliers have been the last couple of years. So I think that right now it could go either way. Once again, I would still pick the Warriors as of right now, but I would not be shocked if the Celtics or the Raptors defeat them in the finals.
Series for the first time in the last 3 years or so, and I'm loving that reality. I will say this though, let's make sure we don't get too excited about what happened to the Golden State Warriors last night. Steph Curry 2 of 8 from 3-point range, just 10 points for the game. Klay Thompson 0 for 5 from 3-point range, just 14 points for the game. Hyman 2 for 13 combined shooting from 3-point range. Do we really think that that's going to happen?
Well, not necessarily, but the question begs to be asked. Did they both shoot that poorly from 3-point range because they both had off nights on the same night, or was it because of the defense that the Toronto Raptors were playing on the 3-point line?
Especially with the open shots that they had last night, I'm here to tell you that's not going to happen.
No.
So that part is fool's gold. In the first meeting, Steph Curry did not play. That was Kevin Durant without Steph Curry. So let's keep that in mind. Let's understand there's two aberrations in the two meetings between these two teams.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get too overly excited.
But there's
Yeah, you shouldn't. But at the end of the day, the Raptors did beat them twice and beat them relatively handily the second time around. So we'll see. Once again, I oftentimes watch how a team plays, not so much what the score is at the end of the game. And the way that the Raptors play, it's going to be very conducive to being successful against the Warriors in the finals, should both teams get there.
They're certainly legit title contenders, and as you said, Max, if we see Kyle Lowry in the regular season in the playoffs, could be the difference maker. Let's leave it there, guys.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how things go. So peace.